Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Erev Tov. Meeting is being recorded. Okay, perfect. Okay. Okay, you ready, my friends? Ready for a new journey? For all humankind. Okay, we're going to begin. We got some cupcakes. We got a drink. Good evening. We'll start with a joke, as is my custom. We'll start with a joke. Good evening, Gary. And then with a question. Deal? So the joke is about Bernie Lifshitz, who finally retires. Who's in the schmata business, somewhere in the Lower East Side. And his friend says, "What are you doing now with your retirement?" So he says, "I'm going to get a membership and join the Fifth Avenue Racket Club." So his friend says, "You can't join that club. The Fifth Avenue Racket Club, they don't let Jews in there." He says, "Don't worry, I'm going to get in. I'm going to figure it out." Okay, fine. Anyway, next day he goes for his interview. He signs up. He comes for his acceptance interview. And they look at him, they say, "So, what's your name?" He says, "My name is Bernard Vanderhaven." Okay. And where are you from? Said, "I live in Southampton." "And what's your wife's name?" "Melanie." "And I have two daughters, Betsy and Susie." So very nice. The interviewer asks him, "What religion are you?" He says, "Religion? Why, I'm Goyish, of course." That was a joke. But now, but now on this series, no, I want to ask you a question. On a scale of 1 to 5, okay, a scale of 1 to 5, this isn't exercise one in the book, but I'll ask it to you outside. On a scale of 1 to 5, where 1 represents completely universal, completely open, and 5 represents completely closed, Jews only, completely exclusive, where would you say Judaism falls on that barometer? Between being a completely universal, completely open religion to being a very, very insular, secluded religion. It depends. Gary is very smart. Gary has finally figured out he's about to graduate. That was the answer. Okay, it depends. But this is a number question. I know you're not an accountant, you're a lawyer, but on a scale of 1 to 5, we'll start with 1 being the most open. Here's a question. Is Judaism a members only club? Or does Judaism have a universal message? Both. So if you had to rate it 1 to 5, put a snack in the middle of that 3, is that where you would put it? You can't put it at 1 and 5. That's cheating. I know Jews do numbers in their own, Jackie Mason's a whole spiel that looking for jokes about Jews and non-Jews. Okay, but so now you're trying, that's great, but you're trying to get 2 numbers into one answer. So that's very Jewish. 2 for the price of 1. Yeah. 9. Yeah. So you're trying to get both in also. 9 out of 10. Yeah. Scale of 1 to 5. Here's his own numbers. He's even more Jewish. He's trying to get 2 numbers for the price of 1. He's trying to make up his own numbers. So I don't teach math. I just teach Torah. A simple 1 to 5 question. I'm getting confused. Yeah, Cheryl. You say 5, then it's very insular. Very insular, very exclusive. What does Stein say in the back? 5. Okay, well, a 9 in insular, being a very exclusive religion. Okay. Wendy, any thoughts from you? Oh, and I'm watching the chat. If you are watching on Zoom, feel free to chat away. And I see that Ravit says members only, but we serve as a message for all humanity. Cheryl's raising her hand with a 4. Okay, meaning also pretty exclusive and insular. Yeah, Wendy, what are you going to say? Three and a half. Okay. Yeah. 2.5. 2.5. Oh boy. Not 2.6. And Ravit says also it depends. So she's learning from you, Gary. It depends. So it's a very good question. And I'll ask you one more question because every good question deserves a follow-up question, right? So when you think of the great missionary religions of the world, those that are out there, proselytizing and being evangelicals and trying to, save the world, save humanity. Reminded of another joke about this rabbi and a priest that are standing at the edge of a road and they're holding this big sign and it says, "Turn around, the end is near." Right? The end is near. and this car comes riding by. He sees the priest standing there with the sign. The turnaround there. He gives him he gives him a finger and speeds off. A minute later, they hear a big splash and a crash, and one priest says to the other, "You think it might be better if instead of the sign saying the end is near, we say, 'Careful, the bridge is broken'?" That's just off the top of my head. But so when you think about religions that are busy proselytizing and busy trying to convert everyone, where would you put Judaism on that list of religions?
No.
Zero, right? We don't make it to the list. We try and turn them away. We're a minus one, Michael says. We're a minus one. And, Jews are not really very well known for proselytizing. In fact, as many correctly said, we turn them away, which is why there's a very common conception out there that Judaism is an exclusively Jewish religion. It's for Jews. And if you're not Jewish, you're Goyish. It's an all-inclusive label, which is not a derogatory word, by the way. Goyish just means a nation. Goy is a nation, but that's it. This is exclusive. And if you've ever had to explain, like Passover to your friends at work, oh, why are you eating those stale crackers that, because 50,000 years ago, our grandfathers ate crackers. And if you're a little more religious and you ever try to ask a non-Jew to turn on the lights for you and you're home on Shabbos, and you try hinting to them, well, it's dark in my house, but I can't really turn on the light, but it's dark and it's, right? It's a little bit complicated. We're not, perhaps, it's not always so easy to explain the kosher thing and, some of the more intricate details of Judaism to those that are not so well involved. So very hard to imagine. This is a very universal religion. And my lights are off. If I can't turn them on, but so generally speaking, it's a completely understandable perception that Judaism is a very exclusive and very reclusive religion just for us, not to be shared with anybody else. And by the way, if you believe this, you have a lot of very good, authentic Torah texts to use as a source for this idea. Let's start at the very beginning. In a few weeks will be the holiday of Shavuos, when the Jewish people stood at Mount Sinai and we made a covenant with God that we would be his chosen people forever. And at that time, when the Jewish people made a covenant, look at page 3, text number 1. Moses went up to God and called him from the mountain, saying, "This is what you shall say to the house of Jacob and tell the children of Israel. You yourselves have seen what I did to Egypt, how I carried you on eagle's wings and brought you to me. And now, if you will listen to my voice and keep my covenant, you will be my treasured nation from among all the peoples, for the entire earth is mine. And you will be for me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words you shall speak to the children of Israel." What is God saying the Jewish people are going to be? My treasured nation. And Am Segula. Am Segula means my chosen people, my cherished, my favorite, my special people. You'll be a Mamlechas Kohanim v'Goy Kodesh. You'll be a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. So not only in the very beginning, even before we receive the Torah, does God say to the Jewish people, you will be my exclusive chosen people, they'll be mine forever and ever. In addition to that, comes the heart of the message, where God then reminds the people of what they witnessed when they left Egypt. And what does God say? Text number 1b, I am the Lord your God who took you out of Egypt from a house of slavery. What does God remind the Jewish people of? Not a universal message that I'm the God who created heavens and earth. Not I'm the God, who's the all-powerful, almighty, omnipresent being. What does God remind the Jewish people of? The fact that I took you out of Egypt. You experienced redemption and freedom. You experienced this unbelievable opportunity to be taken out of slavery, to be a unique nation for God. And therefore, and one more text. This is text number 2. Text 1c. The Torah that Moses commanded us is a heritage of the community of Jacob. This is the very, very first Torah verse we ever teach a child. When the Talmud says, when the child starts to learn how to read, to speak, the first Torah verse that we teach the child is this verse. Torah Tziva lanu Moshe, many songs to it. This is the Torah that God commanded Moses. It's an inheritance of the Jewish people. And so we have over here quite clearly that Judaism and Torah is exclusive. It's given to the chosen people of God. It's given to those that experience the freedom and the exodus from Egypt. It's an inheritance that we get from birth. It's not to be shared. It's not universal. That's definitely the way it seems. And in fact, Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, who's a towering figure of modern Jewish thought, and who was able to articulate the challenges and the struggles of the Jewish people today, he describes what we call this code of differences. One more book here. He describes this code of difference. Text number 2. Jewish law imposes a code of difference. Jews are not to be like all the nations. Internally, hey man, just sit over here, man. There's space here. The seat's right here in the front. You come late, you go in the front. That's how it works. Internally, so let me start again. Jewish law imposes a code of difference. Jews are not to be like all the nations. Internally, this was a source of pride. Expressed in Bilam's blessing, it is a people that dwells apart, not reckoned among the nations. Externally, it was a source of resentment. Caught in Haman's complaint to Achashverosh, there is a certain people scattered and dispersed, whose laws are different from these of any other people. So what do we see over here? Beautiful text. There's a conflict the Jewish people have. On one hand, we're God's chosen people. That's great. On the other hand, because we're God's chosen people, a lot of people are very jealous of us. And that's why you have the very, very famous quote from our good friend Fiddler on the Roof, right? Tevye the milkman, where he says to God, it's so nice you chose us, but couldn't you choose someone else for a change? Because being chosen comes with this entire package of chosenness, which is a source of pride for the Jewish people, but also a source of contention and jealousy. So we have this idea that externally we're not meant to be like the other nations. We're meant to dress different, to look different. Torah wants us to be different. We count ourselves differently. So it does not sound like Judaism is meant for others. Now, what about converts? When someone wants to convert, we do allow converts. There's converts sitting here in the room, right? Judaism allows converts. However, let me give you a verse about converts. Says the Talmud in Yevamos, text number 3, what is the meaning of that which is written? He who serves as a guarantor for a stranger shall suffer evil. This means evil after evil will befall those who accept converts. That's a powerful statement. That's a powerful statement. Evil after evil will befall those who accept converts. Can you imagine such a statement? I mean, we know many, many, many wonderful, beautiful, amazing, religious, dedicated, sincere people that have joined Judaism. And some of the greatest rabbis in history, including Onkelos and Rabbi Akiva, who was a descendant of converts, are from converts. So what does that mean? So the Tosfos, which was authored by a group of Talmudic commentators in the Middle Ages in France and in Germany, explains a very important halachic principle, which is that when it says in the verse, evil after evil befall those who accept converts, Rabbi Yitzchak said, this refers to instances where non-Jews are encouraged to convert, or if they are accepted too readily and too quickly. However, if they demonstrate a genuine and earnest effort to embrace the faith, we are obliged to accept them. Which means a very, very important halachic principle over here, that conversion is possible, but only if they really, really prove it. And anyone who's gone through the halachic process of a proper conversion knows that it's quite a long, difficult process. And when a person proves that they're worthy and that they're the right, that's a long journey. So the door's locked, door's closed, and if they want to join, they got to knock and keep on knocking until eventually someone opens the door a little bit, and then you got to keep on knocking until they open it all the way, which all can be led to bring us to thinking that Judaism is an exclusive religion that is not meant to be shared with those that don't deserve to know. Yeah, every parent, the kids get older, you know, Judaism is not for the world to know. It's exclusive for us. And yet, my friends, having validated this perception for you, now let me tell you what we're going to do tonight. We are going to discover that this idea of separateness and chosenness is not the whole story. In fact, it's just one part of a much larger universal vision. And what I am going to hopefully show you tonight, and what we will all walk away with, is understanding that from the very beginning of Judaism, its core mission was to deliver a revolutionary message to all of humanity. That is what we're going to try and accomplish tonight. So I'm telling you now what we're going to say, and then we'll say it, to understand that Judaism, although there is an element of exclusiveness and of chosenness and separateness in Judaism, at its core, that's only a part of the story. We have an obligation to be, from the very beginning of our religion, from the very beginning, from the foundations of Judaism, to be the ones to bring a revolutionary message of values and of God, which we'll talk about soon, to all of humanity. Okay. So, to understand this, to back up this statement, this very, very almost seemingly fantastical statement that's not really grounded in the reality that we all know about the Judaism of today, that a core part of our identity is to be a light unto the nations, we'll talk about later, and to be the ones who bring a universal message of Judaism to all of humanity, we need to go back to the beginning of Judaism. Actually, even before the beginning of Judaism. Let's go back to Abraham, the first Jew, and to the contrast, to the one that the sages always compare Abraham to. And who is that? Who was the great holy man that lived before Abraham? Noah. Noah, the Torah tells us, was a great tzaddik. Torah tells us that Noah found favor in the eyes of God. He was a righteous man, perfect in his generations. Noah walked with God. Can you imagine? They don't say about me and you, right? Noah is being, very few people can say that the Torah says about them that they were a tzaddik. Their mother, or whatever, but like the Torah says it, God says it. And we know that the name Noah itself, anyone knows what the name Noah means? Anyone? Right? What is comfort? Very good, Mindy. Noah means comfort or consolation. The very presence of Noah brought consolation to God. You know why? Because Noah lived in a very, very dark, immoral, corrupt time. When people were full of corruption and lawlessness and violence, the world was terrible, and God regretted having made man. Noah was the only righteous person that gave God some comfort. That's saying a lot, by the way. That's saying a lot. And so God comes to Noah and says, guess what, Noah? I decided I'm going to destroy the world. I'm going to bring a flood. I want you to make an ark. Build an ark so when the flood comes, you and your family will be saved. What does Noah do? Exactly what God told him. I mean, obviously, no duh. He's a tzaddik, right? He's a righteous man. So if God said to do something, what does Noah do? Exactly what God said to do. And he begins to build an ark. Now, you know how long it took him to build this ark? 120 years. He's building and building and building. For decades, he's building. He had to get permits and zoning, the whole joke. He had to get zoning and architectural, and and there was the environmentalists came up against him because they're going to ruin the environment, and then there was the bird. It took him a long time, and he didn't have helpers. He couldn't hire someone. There was no, he had to grow the trees, cut the trees, and he's building this ship in the middle of his backyard. He didn't live by the ocean. He wasn't living in a beach town. And so people walk by and they see Noach is schwitzing in his yard, building this massive ark, big enough to hold every kind of animal. It's big, 3 stories high. And back then, things weren't so big. It's all. And they ask him, "Hey, Noach, what are you doing?" And he tells them, "Oh, God is going to bring a flood. He's going to destroy the world, and I'm preparing for this flood by building an ark to save us." And they all mocked him, and they laughed at him. Said, "You're crazy? You think me a flood?" I said, "Yeah, that's why I'm building it here. I don't need to build it by the ocean. The waters will come here, and we're gonna." So, on one hand, we know the end of the story. What's the end of the story? It was a flood. And how many people did Noah save with him and take with him onto the ark? Just his family. Just so they had no choice but to listen to him. Noah, for all of his righteousness and all of his spiritual connection and devotion to God, was not able to inspire even one single person to get on the boat with him. Not because he didn't believe. He did believe. He did believe. Anyway, let's move on. So the flood comes, civilization's wiped out, and now we come to a new man 10 generations later. His name is Avraham. And I'm going to tell you about Avraham, and then we're going to answer the question, why was Noah not chosen to be the father of the Jewish people? What was it about Noah that messed him up so that Avraham deserved? So I want to tell you a story. We all know the story of Avraham. We discovered God. We're going to get to that later. I want to read to you a different story of Avraham. It's a little bit of a long story. It's very, very detailed. It's perhaps longer than is necessary, but only by reading the entire length of this dialogue will you appreciate what we're about to read. What we're going to read now is when God decides, after Avraham has already proved his loyalty and righteousness to God, and Avraham has also become a righteous person, God decides that there's another town of evil, wicked people, like the people of the times of Noah, would need to be destroyed. I'm referring to the city of Sodom. That's right. And God said, before I destroy the city, let me tell Avraham that I'm going to destroy it. So I'll tell you why he tells Avraham. Let me tell Avraham. Now, Avraham has no vested interest in these people. Avraham didn't live in Sodom. He didn't do business in Sodom. He had nothing to do with the people of Sodom. And yet, what does he do? We're going to read right now. He prays for them. He doesn't just pray for them. Text number 5. God says to Avraham, the outcry from Sodom and Gomorrah has grown immense, and their sin is very grave. I will descend now and see whether their actions truly match the outcry that he has reached me. If they do, I will bring destruction. If not, I will know what to do. Okay? So he says to Avram what is going to happen, and Avram approaches God and says, will you also destroy the righteous together with the wicked? Perhaps there are 50 righteous people in the city. Will you still destroy it and not spare the place for the sake of the 50 righteous who live there? So he's arguing with God and says to God, you can't destroy the city. There must be some good people living there that are worthy of being saved. How could you destroy the whole city? It would be beneath you to act in such a way, to kill the righteous along with the wicked, treating both alike. Far be it from you. Shall the judge of all the earth not act justly? So God replied, if I find 50 righteous people in Sodom, I will spare the entire region for their sake. Avram answered, behold, I have dared to speak to my Lord, though I am but dust and ashes. Perhaps there are 5 fewer than 50. Will you destroy the whole city for the lack of 5? God said, I will not destroy it if I find 45. Abraham continued, perhaps 40 will be found there. Abraham's not giving up so fast. He says, maybe there's 40 righteous people who will have the merit to say 4 of the 5 cities in the region of Sodom. And God answered, I will not act for the sake of 40. Abraham said, please let my Lord's anger not flare up as I speak. He knows he's pushing it a little bit. He's being a little chutzpah. He says, perhaps 30 will be found there. God replied, I will not do it if I find 30. Abraham said, behold, I have dared to speak to my Lord again. Perhaps 20 will be found there. God said, I will not destroy it for the sake of 20. So finally, Avram doesn't give up. He keeps on trying, and Avram says, please let my Lord not be angered. And I will speak just one more time. Perhaps 10 righteous people will be found there. And God responded, I will not destroy it for the sake of 10. Do you understand what's happening in this conversation? It's absolutely amazing. Avram approaches God, and the Hebrew word in the conversation is vayigash. Vayigash is an expression of the coming forth for battle. Like when Yehuda and Yosef meet, right? And Yehuda's going to fight with Joseph, the viceroy of Egypt. That's the word vayigash. Avram approaches ready to fight for a people he doesn't know, for a people he doesn't have to do anything with, for people that are sinners, that are deserving of the punishment God wants to give them. And yet, even though they are not righteous people and they deserve to be punished, Abraham repeatedly asks God, please don't get angry with me, God. I know I'm pushing the envelope a little, but how could we destroy them? There must be some good there. There must be some righteous people. There must be some merit in which to save these people. And this is the difference between the righteous, holy Noah and the advocate of all people, Avraham. Noah was very, very righteous. But at the end of the day, he was only focused on his own survival. He did what he had to do. He told the people it's going to be a flood, but he didn't care if they repented or didn't repent. Whether or not they changed their ways was not going to make a difference to Noah, because Noah was going to be saved. But Avram cared deeply. He cared deeply about every single human being, not just his family, not just his relatives. He cared deeply for every single human being with an active and profound concern for their welfare. And that is an amazing difference. So far, it's clear. But let me take you a step further. Why did God even start this conversation in the first place? Why did God come to Abraham and say, by the way, Abraham, I'm going to destroy the city of Sodom? Does God need Abraham's permission to destroy the city of Sodom? Like, what's his connection? Abraham doesn't live there. His nephew is there, but that he saved his nephew. Okay, so he wanted to test Avram's reaction to see if he would stand up for the people. Okay, that's a good answer. But that's not the answer in the Torah. It's a good answer, but in the Torah, there's a different answer. We started reading the last text from verse 19, from verse 20. Now let's go back to verse 19. Okay, let's go back to one verse. When God says why he's going to tell Abraham about his plan to destroy the city of Sodom. And God says to himself, I'm going to tell Abraham, you know why? Because I love Abraham, because of his commitment to guide his children and followers to follow God's path and uphold righteousness and justice. This is a verse where God says, why am I going to tell Abraham? Because I love Abraham. Why do I love Abraham? For two reasons. In the Hebrew, it says two things. Because he's going to command his children to follow in the ways of Hashem, la'asais tzedakah u'mishpat. Tzedakah means righteousness. Charity is a bad translation of tzedakah. Close. Tzedakah is righteous, like tzaddik is to be righteous. Tzedakah is righteous. And mishpat is justice. Meaning, Abraham's greatness was not just in his own personal devotion to doing what God wanted of him. Abraham's greatness lay in his commitment to transmitting a legacy that would walk in the ways of God, and specifically in which ways, in which path? Not a path of spiritual devotion per se, but a path of tzedakah u'mishpat, a path of righteousness and of justice. So in the previous reading, the previous section, what do we see? That Abraham was a man of unbelievable compassion, of unbelievable care and concern for other people, for strangers. But in this verse, what do we see? That the reason why God even loves him and God chooses to communicate with him his plan is because he didn't only feel emotionally for other people. Abraham was teaching his family and teaching his followers to build a society built on these pillars of tzedakah or mishpat, of charity, of righteousness, and of justice. And that is why Abraham was the first Jew. The beginning of our very religion, the very foundation, the very, very first seeds of a religion called Judaism begins in a person who understands that I have a deep obligation to care for each and every single human being alive during my time. And I have to educate them to go in the ways of God through tzedakah or mishpat, through righteousness and through justice. Now, the words right, so far we're clear, you all with me? Okay. The words righteousness, though, and justice are very big words. They're like cliche words, or catchwords. What does tzedakah mean? What is justice? I'm saying many people can explain justice in many ways. Iran is hanging protesters now, and they're also calling it justice. You know what I'm saying? You can convolute the word in many ways. What does the word justice even mean? Is there a tangible framework how to implement such vague words? The answer is the Torah tells us that God actually gave a moral, ethical framework of tzedakah or mishpat, of righteousness and justice for all of humanity, known as the seven Noahide laws. Here, my friends, is how the Rambam, the great medieval codifier of Jewish law, presents these seven laws. And he says that God commanded Adam concerning 6 matters. What were the 6 matters given to Adam and to Eve? He forbade idolatry, cursing God, murder, illicit sexual relations, theft, and he instructed him to establish a judiciary or court system. And then later to Noah, after the flood, God added another prohibition, which was consuming a limb torn from a living animal. I don't want to distract or confuse you, but no, Adam wasn't allowed to kill animals, period. The permission to eat animals only came after Noah saved the animals in the flood, which is why this was added later to Noah. And Adam didn't have this commandment because Adam never killed any animal. But even to Noah was allowed to kill animals to eat, he was warned not to cause them any pain and not to torture them and not to eat from their limbs while they're still alive. They have to be humanely slaughtered first. And that's why these are the 7 Noahide laws that go to all of humanity who come from Noah. Okay? Now. Okay, good for them. They got 7, and we got 613. Yeah, like, okay. What does that have to do with us? What is this, everything I said till now, what does it have to do with all of us sitting here in this room? So the answer is that as the physical and as the spiritual children and descendants of Avraham, we are tasked with teaching these laws and encouraging their observance throughout the world. In fact, the Rambam, Maimonides, further tells us that when the Jewish people stood at Mount Sinai, which we mentioned earlier, right? We were all sitting at Mount Sinai, Shavuos is coming, and God gave us the mitzvah, the sister gave us a covenant, and gave us our commandments. Together with that, God also gave us the obligation to ensure that all inhabitants of the world accept the Noahide laws. That's a clear statement from the Rambam in the book of Jewish law that we have an obligation. We accepted this obligation when we were standing at Mount Sinai. And when God came to us and God said, you will be my chosen people, you'll be my kingdom of priests, God was giving us a mandate that we would be his agents, his PR people, I'm not saying my PR person, right? To be his PR people, to spread his message to all of mankind. And these laws, these 7 laws, they're not just a few basic, simple, don't kill, don't steal. Contained within these 7 laws is like a distilled version of all of Judaism. Says the Sefer HaChinuch, which explains the reasons. This is a book that explains the reasons for each and every single one of the commandments of the Torah. And this book, the Sefer HaChinuch, explains, text number 8, do not be misled by the number 7 when it comes to the Noahide laws, even though this number is well known and cited in the Talmud. These 7 laws are not 7 isolated commands, but they are 7 broad categories encompassing many specific laws. For instance, the prohibition of illicit sexual relations is counted as one Noahide laws, yet it includes many distinct prohibitions. Likewise, the prohibition of idolatry is a single law that contains numerous details. And the prohibition of theft covers all conduct that leads to theft, such as coveting, etc., etc. And I'm not going to get into all the details. It's not the point for right now. All you need to know is this principle, that these 7 laws, first of all, are 7 universal laws that apply to all of humanity. Number 2, you need to know that it is our responsibilities as Jews to teach these 7 laws to all of humanity. And number 3, you need to know that these 7 laws are like a scaffolding. They contain within them all of the values, all of the messages for mankind, for the universe that God wants to convey, each and every single one of these, second, contains a deep reservoir of tremendous moral wisdom, of tremendous ethics. And what we're going to do, as we unpack these 7 laws, we'll see what deep spiritual wisdom is contained within them. Yes.
We get from these 7 laws and commandments.
Good question. The 10 commandments at Mount Sinai were basically the 10 fundamental laws of Judaism. And by the way, a good number of these 7 no universal laws are the same as the 10 commandments. I'm the Lord your God, no other God beside me, don't use my name in vain, don't covet, don't steal, don't commit adultery. Many of them are the same, and they're obviously foundations, not just in the universal sense of the Jewish sense. There are some that are unique, like keeping Shabbos, for example, is unique to the Jewish people, and that's not one of the 7, it's part of the 10. But there's a lot of overlap. The 10 commandments that we talked about are the 10 fundamental principles that God gave the Jews for the Jewish worldview, which, after all, does have a different value system than just the universal value system we're talking about in this course. But at that time, God told the Jews, here's the 10 for you, which is what we focus on Shavuos. But God also said, here's the 7, which apply to all of humanity. And at that time, when we made a covenant with God, we made a covenant to be his priests. What's a priest? The one that carries forth the message and brings people close to God. I'm going to talk about this soon. To be his priests and to be his agent and to connect the world to God and to teach the world these 7 values. Okay? Now, not only that, if you remember, we read that it's our job from Mount Sinai to teach the world these 7 universal laws. In addition, the Rambam tells us, listen to this, my friends, text 9, that anyone who accepts these 7 laws and observes them is counted among the righteous of the nations and has a share in the world to come. And that is an amazing statement. Jewish law is telling us that a non-Jew that keeps these 7 Noahide laws and follows his instructions is called a Chasidei Umayis Ha'olam, from the righteous of the nations. And because of that, we don't need to proselytize. We don't need to try and convert people, because in Judaism we recognize that there is a valid and honored path to spiritual fulfillment that exists entirely outside of the framework of Jewish spiritual fulfillment. Yes, there's a lot of overlapping commands that are in both sets, like don't kill and don't commit adultery, and I'm the one Lord God, which we'll talk about tonight. But it's a different track, a completely independent track outside of the Jewish system. And when the person follows that track, they are going to receive their place, their rightful place in the world to come. So heaven is not reserved for Jews per se, which is very unlike any other religion, right? Every other religion says, if you don't believe like me, you're going straight to hell. Straight. You don't even have to pass go and collect $200 on the way. And that's why they feel this need to save us from the eternal barbecue of wherever they think we're going to go, and to bring us to their heaven. And Jews say, no, that's not true. We're going to go to heaven. You can also go to heaven. Heaven's big enough for all of us. And God created a universal system for all of humanity to be able to get to heaven, not being Jewish. And that's a very, very empowering, unique, I don't know any other religion that appreciates that. Meaning, Judaism does not, even though Judaism is very exclusive to Jews, Judaism does not see itself as the only path to God or the only way to achieving an ultimate spiritual reward. And that's why it's not our mission to convert others to Judaism. It's our mission to help humanity live more justly, more in touch, more connected to God's will, as God wants them to be. Understand? Jews trying to convert everyone to Judaism will be like doctors trying to make everyone become health professionals. Good doctors don't make you a doctor. What are they to do? Just make you healthy. Our job is not to make everyone like us. Our job is to make everyone healthy, spiritually and emotionally and psychologically and morally healthy. And when we do that, we fulfilled our mission and help them fulfill their mission and put them on their path to heaven, just like we get a path to heaven. Okay, clear? So now that we have this, the goal of this lesson, and this course rather, is not to turn us all into evangelicals going out on our bicycles, knocking on doors to teach people the 7 Noahide laws. That's not the goal. Because the first thing, obviously we have a job to help everyone, but the first step of being able to inspire someone else to live a more ethical life, you know what that first step is? Doing it yourself, looking inward, self-inspiring. Only after we understand this vision for humanity well on an internal level can we even begin to be an influence on those around us. So trying to be influential before you have depth, I mean, today you can do that. Today you can be influencer and be fake. But in the real world, we have to first gain internal wisdom, internal understanding of these values that are God-given rules for all of humanity. And after we understand them well, and we can live by them, then we can begin to sometimes frontally, explicitly, and sometimes subliminally, not even knowing it, be an inspiration to others in the way they behave. Okay? Say a story, I wanted to later, so I could give a story for a minute. This idea we can subliminally inspire people. The Rabbi once spoke about David Chase, very, very wealthy businessman from New Jersey. Or Chase Bank, I don't know Chase Bank, I think maybe in the beginning. David Chase. And he made a commitment to start praying every single day. And the Rebbe once spoke about the fact that when he was praying every single day, he was on his yacht. And he asked the captain of the yacht, who wasn't Jewish, which way is east? The captain was curious. Why do you need to know which way is east? You're not driving the boat. You just enjoy your breakfast, right? So he told him, I need to pray. And Jews pray facing east toward Jerusalem. So I need to know which way is Jerusalem so I can pray. This non-Jewish captain was so impressed, so inspired by the fact that this very wealthy Jewish businessman wants to pray that he saw that this guy is on his yacht on vacation, not at the synagogue. No one sees if he's praying or not. He's on the yacht, nobody can see what he's doing. And he's taking time on his vacation to put on his tefillin and to find east and to pray to God. But this non-Jew committed to also start praying every single day. If I'm not mistaken, this non-Jewish ship captain wrote to the Rebbe telling him that he started praying every single day. And the Rebbe spoke about this. So when we understand these values that are so integral to a healthy humanity, maybe we'll be able to advocate for them and be able to explain them to our neighbors. But even if we don't, even if we never frontally talk about this, just living with these values is already the ability to inspire people. We might never know we inspired just by the way we are living ourselves with this awareness of the values and the framework that God wants all of humanity to live. And that's why the Meiri tells us, the great Talmudic commentator, that anyone who engages in the study of the 7 Noahide laws, their principles, their details, and their applications, in which most of the Torah's core teachings are contained, is worthy of great honor, even as much as the high priest himself. Amazing. Anyone that studies these 7 Noahide laws is worthy of the same honor as the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, that once a year on the holiest day of the year on Yom Kippur would enter the holiest place, the Holy of Holies. Any person who tries to achieve spiritual greatness by following in the framework that God gave humanity can achieve that level of closeness to God like the high priest in the Holy of Holies on Yom Kippur. In addition, as we already explained, that most of the Torah's core teachings are contained in these 7 Noahide laws, which means, as I already said, but we'll say it again, these 7 Noahide laws are not simplified, basic laws. There's a lot of depth within these laws that contain the foundational ethics and values of Judaism. Okay. Therefore, my friends, our first obligation is to learn these laws properly. And then secondly, after we understand it, obviously, if you know something is good for someone, you can't help yourself from sharing it. Like Avram, who couldn't help himself sharing it, will be able to help others as well. But that's secondary. Okay. And now, my friends, the introduction is over. That was a very short introduction, I know. Now we're ready to start studying the 7 Noahide laws. We'll do a little bit each week. Today we're going to talk about the first 2. The first of the 7. What's the first of the 7? Belief in God. Obviously, if it's the first of the 7, obviously it's pretty important, right? That's why it's the first. That's the foundational principle. And to understand this idea of monotheism and believing in one God, we need to go back to Abraham. Very good. The first Jew, the father of monotheism, the man who looked at the stars and the sun and the moon and said, oh, no, you're not in charge. There's one God in charge. And let's see what monotheism exactly is, okay? So Avram was born in a city called Ur-Kasdim. It was a city in Mesopotamia, overflowing with idols and superstition. Believe it or not, pun intended, his father, believe it or not, it was a corny joke. His father was an idol merchant. I'll just stick to my jokes, forget the jail life jokes. Believe it or not, that was in the book. You see, when I read the joke from the book, it doesn't. Believe it or not, his father, Terach, ran a family business selling idols. Had a store, I don't know what they call it, idol store. And the Rambam is a famous story, how young Avraham began to wander around mentally, trying to find who's in charge of the world. And as soon as Avraham, this mighty soul, text number 11, as soon as he was weaned, he began to think on his own. Even as a young child, his mind would wander and question by day and by night. He had no teacher and no one to guide him. He was mired among the foolish idol worshippers of Ur-Kasdim. His father, his mother, and everyone around him served idols, and he too would join them. Yet his heart kept searching, and his mind kept probing. Eventually, he discovered the true path, and through his own sound reasoning, grasped what was right, came to understand that there must be one God who created everything, and that among all that exists, there is no other God but him. So everyone else is happily following the latest trends, worshiping whichever latest idols came out on the market, the newest fashion, the newest model, the newest version. And Avram was on the other side, doing his own thing. They're bowing down to the family merchandise, and he's asking questions, dangerous questions, such as, if this statue was just made yesterday, who made the guy that made the statue yesterday, right? Who made the guy that made the God? And eventually, Avram discovered the one creator who animates all of existence. And once he discovered God, he could not sit idly by. There was a pun there too. I know. Terach was an idol. Terach was an idol maker and a salesman. He once went out and left Avram in charge of the shop. And people would come in to buy idols, and Avram would question them. He's questioning them. How old are you? And they say, oh, I'm 60 years old. You poor fellow, Avram would exclaim, imagine that a man of 60 is bowing down to something made yesterday. Embarrassed, the customers would turn around and leave. One day, a woman comes in carrying a big bowl of fine flour. And she says to Avram, I want you to offer this as an offering to the idols in the store. So what does Avram do? He takes a stick and he smashes each and every single one of the idols except for the largest idol in the entire store. He places the axe or the stick in the hands of the largest idol. And when Terach, his father, returned and they saw this destruction in the store where all the idols were smashed except for the biggest one, he said, what happened? Who did this to my idols? And Avram says to his father, I must be honest with you. A woman came with an offering of flour. And when I said it before them, they started fighting. And each one said, she didn't say which idol she wants to give it to. She just said, give it to the biggest idol. So all the idols started fighting between each other. Who is the biggest? Who's the most important idol? Until finally one said, I'm going to eat first. And one said, I'll eat first. Until the biggest of all the idols got angry and everyone else. He grabbed the stick and smashed all the idols. So Terach, his father, says to his son, "Are you mocking me? You know these idols can't move. You know they can't speak and they can't think and they can't argue who's greater. They're statues." And Avram says to his father, "Dear father, listen to your own words. Don't you understand? If the idol can't defend itself, if it can't defend its own honor and own glory, how could the idol defend you?" And his father realized he was right, but it's a long story. His father couldn't do anything because he was working for the king. They eventually told about him to the Nimrod. He was thrown to the fiery furnace. Many, many stories how he refused to bow down to Nimrod. If I would have time, I'll tell you many of the stories how when Nimrod arrested him, Nimrod started to debate with Avraham. And he said to Avraham, "You bow down." He said, "You're a person, you can die, you can be burned by fire." It's okay, it's about to fire. He said, "Yeah, but water could put out fire." He says, "Okay, it's about to the water." He said, "But the clouds can carry water." He says, "Bow to the clouds." "But the wind can carry the clouds." Okay, bow down to the wind. He said, "But the wind can blow out the wind can be held in a man can hold wind inside him and hold wind in and blow it out." So, okay, so bow down to me. I can hold wind inside me, but you can be destroyed by fire. And they go around in circles, and many other such stories where the arguments of Avraham. I should have said it slower. I know it's a good story, but there's many such stories where Avraham was able to prove to the world that these acts of idol worship, they're stupid, they're meaningless, they have no purpose. And once Avraham began to recognize and understand this truth, he began to challenge the people who were caused him, debating with them, and showing them that their way was false. When his arguments prevailed, the king sought to put him to death, but a miracle occurred, and Avraham escaped to Haran. There he began to call out with a mighty voice to all of humanity, teaching that there is one God, and that he alone is worthy of worship. He would travel from city to city, from kingdom to kingdom, proclaiming this message and gathering followers wherever he went. As people assembled around him and questioned his ideas, Avram would explain according to the understanding, guiding them step by step until they came to recognize the truth. In time, thousands and tens of thousands joined Avraham. These were the people of the house of Abraham, in whose heart he firmly planted the great principle of faith. This is amazing. Here was a man with no marketing team, no budget for billboards and for radio ads, no social media, no influencers, just by word of mouth, just by explaining the truth with arguments that made sense, showing people the foolishness of bowing down to statues and to worship these gods. He was able to make a difference, to slowly, one by one, bring an entire civilization, to bring tens of thousands of people, which is, again, this is before social media. Tens of thousands of people is a lot of people. To be able to bring them to recognize that there's only one God. And everything else that exists serves that one God. There is no other God besides this one God. Yes, sure.
So if that's true, what did you say that Abraham converted all these people? Aren't they all converted?
Yes. Avraham had many, many thousands of converts. In fact, the Torah says clearly that when he was told by God to go to Israel, he took all the souls that he made in Haran, he brought them with him. So what happened to all those people? That's a very good question. It does not seem like Yitzchak did a very good job keeping them. Yitzchak was very, very strict, very, very demanding. He did not have the love and patience and compassion, so to say, of Avram. He was very, you have to do it right. And by Yaakov, we don't see anymore that Yaakov runs away from his family's house and all that. And by then, all those thousands of converts, they didn't continue. Which is part of God's plan. There's also a certain familial dynasty of the Jews that are descendants of Avraham, not just the spiritual, what's what I'm looking for, not just the students and wisdom of Avraham, but also the physical DNA, the seed of Avraham, which is what we carry inside us. But yes, he made thousands of converts.
Why did we stop there and not continue trying?
Oh, we still allow converts. And by the way, in some ways, every Jew at Mount Sinai converted. At Mount Sinai, there was a conversion process because in Egypt, we all were distracted with, we all lost. The Jews in Egypt weren't worshiping God. So we all went through a conversion process. And by the way, then the Egyptians that joined the Jews leaving Egypt, and it did not work out good for the Jewish people. I don't get into class of conversion right now, how it works, but non-Jews are allowed to convert to Judaism. We have some sitting right here. Boom. A non-Jew can convert to Judaism. Not only have to want to do it, they have to work for it. They have to prove that it's something that they want strong enough that they're going to keep it forever and ever, despite the challenges that will arise in trying to live as a Jew. Okay. Now, in fact, I'll tell you something very interesting. What's the original biblical name for Jews? Ivrim, or in English, Hebrews, right? The Hebrews. Where does the word Hebrew come from? The word Hebrews later became called the Israelites. That was when the Jews left Egypt and went to the land of Israel. Before, we were Hebrews. Why? So Torah tells us, because Abraham was on one side, the Hebrew word Aver is one side, and all the rest of the people of the universe, all of society, was on the other side. You know the joke about this lady that hears on the radio that there's a Meshuggah driving down the 95 and they're going the wrong way in traffic. And she knows her husband should be probably driving home from work right around then. So she calls her husband and says, careful, careful. I heard on the radio that there's the traffic report. There's a guy, a Meshuggah, driving down the 95 the wrong way. Says his wife, one Meshuggah. There's hundreds of Meshuggahs driving the wrong way. So the Torah tells us, text number 12, that a fugitive reported to Avram the Hebrew that Lot had been taken captive. Why was he called a Hebrew? Because the entire world was on one side and he was on the other side. Meaning Avraham introduced a revolution that turned conventional wisdom on its head, that put him on one side, pitting him against the entire world on the other side. He was fearless in teaching these monotheistic ideas. He didn't care. He was able to transform an entire world to begin to recognize the truth of monotheism.
We have to be other, but also part of the world in order to spread our message.
Yes,
And
yes.
Evaluate the rest of the world. We have to be able to have that perspective, to be other, in order to have that perspective so that we can teach.
So Mindy is 100% correct. We have to be other and yet at the same time do our job of sharing that otherness with other people. Very good. Okay. But now that we've established this idea of monotheism that Abraham introduced to humanity, which we didn't spend too much time on, there's a lot more, but you get the idea. He told the world, stop worshiping idols. We all know this. I want to ask you a real two questions. Two questions. The first question is a question of relevance. Is this still relevant today? Meaning today, living in America in 2026, does Abraham's revolutionary message of monotheism still have a revolutionary component to it? Or today is this very conventional wisdom? Back then, every village had its own little idols, and every priest had his own idols and his own thing. So back then, you had to explain that there's really only one God for all of the universe. But today maybe we have atheists. But today, no one's worshiping the God of the sun and the God of the moon, bowing down to trees and worshiping rocks. And you ever been to like a, yeah? Well, it's okay. You can answer the question, sure.
The entire morality rests on the fact that there is one God. I mean, today it is relevant because everybody's with multiculturalism and moral relativity. What's good for me now may not be good for you.
So you're right. You're right. We all believe, but most of, at least in the Western culture, most people in the Western culture believe in one God. So today, to say the first of the 7 commandments, and by the way, it's also the first of the 10 commandments, is believe in one God. Today, almost everyone believes in one God. I think 90-something% of Americans believe in God. So today, is it still the very revolution of Abraham to not worship multiple idols and to only worship one invisible, non-seeable deity that controls and runs the entire world? Is that revolutionary idea still revolutionary today in some capacity or not? You say yes, without a doubt. Why?
Because first of all, there's only 15 billion Jews in the entire world.
Yeah, but you're right, it's 50 million Jews, but how?
They say one God, religions. There's Jesus, there's Muhammad, there's Buddha, there's other forms of
Yeah.
making-
So Hinduism is idol worship.
So,
I don't know if Christianity is or isn't. Muhammad and Jesus are not in the same category, by the way.
yeah.
Muhammad's a prophet, but yeah.
I'm just saying that, I think that it's still relevant the way that we
Okay, so let me
understand God. It's still and it's revolutionary. It's
So-
revolutionary that we're 15 million people and the world hates our freaking guts.
Okay, so now you're going to get to the Jewish. Yeah, the fact that the world hates our guts is a big problem, and that's a whole other course on anti-Semitism and that.
Just like they hated Abraham.
Correct. So we are other. That's for sure. That's the otherness part. What we're discussing today is not our otherness. We're discussing our role as priests of God to bring His message to humanity. So the question I'm asking is, if we were to walk out of here now and stand on the Atlantic Boulevard with signs and say, "There's one God," would we be sharing a revolutionary message that majority of people living here in Florida would be shocked to hear? Or would you say that most Americans living in the times we live in, okay, it is what it is. They believe in God. Maybe they are religious, not so religious. Maybe they have Jesus. They don't like. But generally speaking, the idea of an invisible God that you don't see and can't talk to, and you can talk to him, you don't hear him talking to you anyway. Like that, most Americans accept that premise. So the question is this what we've been talking about when we say that Abraham was a revolutionary? Is not only very nice history to know that once upon a time, many years ago, we had a great grandfather who revolutionized the way man thinks about God. But today, that's become mainstream conventional wisdom. Or is there still something for us today to know, living in the Western culture, about this monotheistic belief, which is revolutionary, that the vast majority of Americans, and perhaps even amongst us, are not yet properly keeping this commandment? That's my first question. It's a question of relevance. And the second question is going to be more philosophical, which is, why does it even make a difference? Why does Judaism so fiercely defend its belief in one God? The most important verse in all of Judaism what's the most important verse? Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. Right here, Israel, the Lord is God, the Lord is one. That's the most important thing. We're being killed. We're being led to the concentration, to the gas chambers. What are we saying? Hashem Echad, God is one. And what if there's two gods? If one is good, isn't two gods, the more the merrier, right? Two for the price of one. You got two tablets for the price of one. Let's get two gods for the price of one. I'm joking. Obviously, there's only one God. We can't. But is it so? Let's say there's two gods. Is that the worst thing in the world?
Yeah, because now you have to decide which one is the real God.
What if one God's in charge of? But what if there's two gods that I worship both? One is a god of money and one's a god of health. When I go to work, I worship, during the daytime I worship the day god, I worship the god of the sun. Or at nighttime I worship the moon. Is that terrible?
Yes.
Why?
It's all that's the amazingness of God, because when you said there's two gods,
You instinctively,
a God is all those two things.
well,
So it can't be. It's something that can't be divided. It's
okay, you're saying God can't be divided, and you're right. By the way, I'm not.
because if you divide it, then you're giving God itself like two different emotions or feelings and God has to be everything.
You're saying a true point, which is that you can't divide God because God is no longer infinite, and he's he is the.
The sun is something you see, get.
Well, so let's say the sun is just a reflection of a God of day.
So, God is untouchable and perhaps incomprehensible, but God is everywhere, everything. If you can define in one particular place with one particular thing, that's not
Okay.
God.
So you're both right. And Baruch Hashem, you got a good Jewish education, and you have this instinctive, healthy reaction that, what are you talking about? God forbid. God is infinite and God is not mathematical, and you can't divide God and you can't define God to a place. And you're both 100% correct. I don't disagree with you. I'm just asking, sometimes you gotta ask like those questions to go a little deeper, go deeper in our own understanding of the idea of one God, which is to ask a slightly heretical question, granted. Why is it so fundamentally like a sacrilegious? Here, that's a better word. Meaning, I understand, yes, we accept the premise God is indivisible, he's not mathematical, he's everywhere all the time. But would it be like, is that the first principle to leading a moral life? Let me say it this way. Is the first foundation for all of humanity to live a life of moral ethics, is the first foundation to believe in one God and not in two gods? Why is that the foundation of leading an ethical life, of righteousness and justice? To the one God is unifying. That's true. That's true. Okay. It's true. That's what we need to discuss tonight. Let's, yeah, I'll quickly, yeah.
And it comes from God, it's gotta be one stopping.
Okay, good. Okay. I'm going to tell you something much deeper, much more intellectually gratifying than just what we're saying is true. I'm not disagreeing at all with what you're saying. To answer these two questions, I want to go back now to the story we're talking about Avram telling his father, where his father came in and he said, "What happened to all my idols?" He said, "Oh, the woman came in with flowers. She didn't know which idol to give it to, so all the idols had a fight, and the big idol took the stick and broke of the." So it's tempting for us, modern, sophisticated, 21st century geniuses of the AI generation, are really as dumb as it gets, but whatever, to think we got life figured out. Back then, they were idiots. They were dimwits. They were like in the Stone Ages. They weren't so smart back then. So they didn't know that statues can't talk. Today, we're much smarter than they were back then. It's very tempting to like minimize the intellectual wisdom of idol worship. Right? It's easy to do it because the statues, like, who's going to bow down to idols? You have to be an idiot to get on your hands and knees so that I can't talk. But the truth is, idolatry has a very, very deep and in some ways authentic, in some ways, like a real foundation. It's very intellectually, there's a lot of intellectual integrity almost to the foundations of idolatry, which is why it became so popular. So what is that foundation of idolatry that makes it make sense? That explains how smart people could worship idols. And once we understand what idol worship really is, then we'll understand why it's actually so prevalent in today's society and how we got to deal with it. Okay. Let's go back to the beginning.
Towards influence.
Yes. In the times of Enosh, you're correct. Times of Enosh. Enosh is a grandson of Adam and Chava. There was a theological revolution that began to take place. And that was as follows. Every single one of the people living then believed in God. They saw God, they're all children and grandchildren of Adam and Eve, created by God. And then a subtle shift begins, and people start to notice the grandeur of the sun, and the consistency of the stars, and the beauty of the wind, and et cetera, and the power of the storms, and the beauty of nature and of trees growing. And they began to make calculations that if God had given these celestial beings such power, then surely they also deserved honor. And these people thought that it was his will that they acknowledge these great powers. I'm not from my own book. I'm not reading a text. Meaning the people were not trying to replace God. What were the people doing? They were trying to honor God through his servants. Understand that? Let me repeat. Enosh, the grandson of Adam and Eve, did not say God doesn't exist. We're going to worship idols. They said God is in charge. But God entrusted the sun to be his agent of the sun. He trusted his servant called rain to give water to mankind. So we are going to honor the servant of the all-powerful God. We're going to honor the moon and the rain and the clouds and the trees. And that's how it began. They built temples to the stars and to the constellations, and they offered sacrifices to them, and they praised them. But soon a distinction between the servant of God, the vehicle of God, and the actual source of blessing and power itself became blurred. And then false prophets arose claiming that either God or these servants of God, the moon, etc., had commanded them to build images and to worship them this way. And these false prophets who wanted to gain power used fear, which is always very, very successful, and says, serve it and you'll prosper. And if you don't serve it, you're going to die. You're going to lose your the power of this and the power of that. And people became afraid and they wanted to keep the rain coming. So they listened to the idols, to the gods, to the prophets of the sun and the moon and the stars and the rain. And they gave the offerings, and they built the temples, until God, as the source of all power, faded from memory, and humanity no longer looked beyond the visible universe for our meaning. This, my friends, what Maimonides writes, is the source of idol worship. Text number 13. Idolatrous practice spread throughout the world. People worshipped images in every possible way, offering sacrifices to them and bowing before them. As the years passed, the honored and awesome name was forgotten, and none recognized him. The entire populace, women and children included, knew nothing other than the forms of wood and stone and the temples and masonry. From their earliest youth, they were trained to bow to these images, to serve them, and to swear by their names. Even the scholars and priests among them imagined that there was no God other than the stars and heavenly spheres, for whose sake these images had been fashioned. The point is that they mistook the means for the master. They thought that the oven produced the food. They thought that they saw the food coming out, so that's where it comes from. And this is what was Avram's discovery was. He didn't just reject superstition to bow down to idols. He shattered this whole fundamentally flawed theology, which was, don't just look at the visible, look beyond the visible to the one who created them all. And so, my friends, if you think about it today, idolatry is not some ancient thing that happened long, long ago. Who can think of some examples of modern day things that we begin to think are the source of our money, the source of our happiness, the source of our health, the source of our blessings in our life, when really they're nothing more than the vehicle through which God is giving us our money and our happiness and our health? How many people, they won't say, my God, my boss is my God, but they worship the boss, they pay their dues, they bow the knee. They think that their paycheck comes from their boss, or from their client, or from their donor, or from their 401k, from their stock market. And they think their health comes from this drug, or this doctor, or this program. And the moment you begin to think my health comes from this drug or from this doctor, and that becomes your source, where you think your health will come from, you have just begun to worship a visible, physical, tangible thing, not as the vehicle of God giving you your health, but now you're seeing it as the source of your health. That is exactly how idol worship began. And the same is true with your doctor and with your money and the stock market and the government and your social media following and your house and the latest development in AI and the weather and the Federal Reserve and the price of oil. I mean, a million things. If you think the price of oil is going to impact your ability to live life, etc., at that moment, you have now taken this physical, visible, tangible thing and made it an idol. You made it a source of your sustenance. And that's the moment that you are no different than the people living in the times of Abraham. It's intense thought. I'll show you a video on this idea.
We don't bow to idols anymore. We don't worship golden calves. But worship didn't disappear. It just changed shape. Today, we worship celebrities. If they wear it, we wear it. If they use it, we use it. We wait hours just to catch a glimpse of them, and we burn hours following every update of their lives. And the pull doesn't stop there. We also turn to money. We treat it like the end-all be-all, always wanting more, no matter how much we have. Listening to people simply because they have a lot of it. Trusting it to give us control, security, and happiness. And then there's success. We sacrifice time, health, and relationships for it. We fear losing it more than losing ourselves. We start to wonder who we are without it. So we say yes, when we should say no. And we aren't there when we should be. Once, bowing meant bending the knee. Now, it means bending the mind. Of course, admiring talent isn't wrong. Liking things isn't wrong. Working hard isn't wrong. The real question is, what's ultimate? When God is in the picture, everything else finds its proper size.
Okay, so the problem isn't having things, right? The problem is when the things are having us and we think that they control us and they control our destiny, they're going to control what we're going to have and how much we're going to have and how much happiness we'll have from it, etc. So monotheism, in summary, is not to believe that there's only one God. There's one God. It's to believe that there's only one source of blessing and only one source of health and of livelihood and of happiness and of children and of everything we have. It's not that we get friends from here and influence from here and money from here and health from here and my wife, from here. There's one source for everything. Only one. That's what monotheism is. And so if you had to translate, what does it mean to live as a monotheist today? You know what the words would be? To live with your eyes on the source of everything, not on the sparks. It's like looking at a light bulb and seeing the light and say, wow, that light is giving light. But it's electricity. The light bulb is just a piece of plastic. It's electricity that's allowing light to shine forth. So monotheism is not an abstract theology. It's not something that happened 3,000 years ago that Abraham came and said, you idiots, you're bowing down to stones. But today we're very sophisticated. Today we would never do that. We would never worship a physical, tangible thing that we can see with our eyes instead of remembering that there's an invisible source to everything. Except we do. Except we do. So what I would like to do is I would like to make this relevant. I want to make this personal. And take a minute, I'll put on a little niggin, and there's papers I put on every table. I put an index card and pens. You don't have to read this to anyone, to show it to anyone. It's your own index card to take home with you. But ask yourself this question. Think for a minute, and I did this myself. 2 questions. What is my idol of choice? What is it that I look at as a source of my, whatever it is that I feel dependent upon for something? And how would my life be better if I could not worship this idol and instead internalize the idea of the monotheistic one God? Think about but think about this. Think about this. Okay, so now we're going to move on. I'm going to do this a little quickly, only because time is not my friend. So when you have take these papers home, let's think about this. It's an important thing to remember. Now, a world without monotheism, a world of chaos. It's a world of anxiety. But when you have one invisible source that is a source of everything, now you have coherence in a very chaotic world. And that's where Jonathan Sacks writes very beautifully, describing what life was like back then when people worshiped many gods. These gods, text 14a, there were many gods. They fought, they struggled, they established hierarchies of dominance, slowly establishing order out of chaos. We have many records of those ancient times. And though the names of the gods change, depending on whether we speak of Mesopotamia, or Egypt, Canaan, or ancient Greece, the stories are remarkably similar. The god of the sky does battle with the god of the sea. And out of his victory, he establishes dry land, usually over the dead body of the slain victim. Right? That's what it was back then. The god of the lightning and the rain impregnates the goddess of the earth, and as crops grow and the land brings forth its produce. The ancient world was one in which order was constantly threatened by chaos. At times in the form of floods and droughts, or by war from invading tribes. The stories they told, they explained to themselves why this is so. And disturbances here reflect more ultimate struggles elsewhere between the gods. The point is that when we have this, awareness, that when we live with many gods, we're living with anxiety. That's the story of our lives, is it not? I really wish I had more time to describe this. Is this not the problem of so many Americans today? The anxiety we have, the stress we have. Why do we feel so stressed out? Because we're being pulled in so many directions. My doctor said I need to do this. My wife said I need to do this. So if I want to be healthy, I need to do what he said. If I want to be happy, I need to do what she said. If I want to make money, I need to do what my client said. If I want to be a good, not have guilt, I need to do what my rabbi said. If I want to have, friends, I need to go to the golf. And so we are being pulled. And this is the story of so many Americans. We have so much anxiety, so much stress, so much, because we have so many gods. And each god is fighting for dominance over our lives. Each god is fighting, I want to be the one controlling you. I want you to worship me. And then the other god comes and says, no, don't stay at work. I want you to worship me. And now we're being pulled. This is the exact definition of the chaos, of the fights between the gods that exist when you don't have one invisible, ultimate power over every other force of nature. I leave that to you to think about, and we're going to move on. So, a Jew that believes in God has trust and serenity. He has peace in his life. He has happiness in his life. Text 15, King David, what does he say? Hashem ro'i lo yechser, the Lord is my shepherd. I shall lack nothing. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. I can walk in the valley of the shadow of death. I fear no evil. Why? Because you are with me. When we have that one invisible God, life is calm and easy. Every Saturday night, we're about to go out of Shabbos back into the world, back into the week. We say, God is my deliverance. I'm confident. I will not be afraid. The God is my strength and my song, even my salvation. This is where the inner stability of a Jew, our inner equilibrium, our inner ability to survive in the chaos of so many competing gods that still are competing gods in 2026, comes from the Jews' monotheistic understanding of one invisible God. And this is something that all of humanity needs. Every human being will be so much happier, live such a more healthy, focused, productive, meaningful, and easy, stress-free life if we could live with this monotheistic idea. What's the flip side of this? The second of the 7 Noahide laws is not to curse God. Not to curse God. And what do you mean to curse God? The culture that prizes free expression, cursing God might seem like a relatively minor offense. What's the big deal? You're cursing, I'm allowed to say whatever I want. Free speech. It's my right. But if monotheism is the whole foundation of a healthy lifestyle, so cursing God, so to say, is like cosmic vandalism. And let me explain. I'll just go straight to the point. Let me explain. Cursing God is not denying God. We have atheists, and we have someone cursing God. The 7 Noahide laws do not say don't deny God. right? There's no, if you believe in God, you don't have to deny God. Remember the joke where this woman that came home from her date, she says to her mother, this boy's not for me. She said, why would happen? He told me he's an atheist, he doesn't believe in heaven and hell. So, I doesn't believe in heaven and hell? Okay. You marry him, and between me and you together, we'll show him there is a hell. What's an atheist? Does an atheist curse God? No. Why not? They don't believe in it. You don't curse something that doesn't exist. Not only does an atheist not curse God because they don't exist, even if someone thinks that God exists, but he's useless, he's powerless. Do you curse a powerless person? No. You only curse someone that you think has the power to do something about it. That's why I'm angry at you. So the atheist who denies God's existence, okay, he denies God, doesn't believe in God. So why would you curse God? You don't believe in him. It's the person who curses God that's a problem. Why? Because when you curse God, what does it mean? It means you believe in God. It means you believe in his power to do something. And by cursing him, you are rejecting his goodness. By cursing him, you are rejecting the fact that he is an all-powerful God that wants to do good. And this is the whole monotheistic force. Depends not just that we believe that there's one God, but there's one God that wants good for us. One God that cares about us. He's not only a singular force of everything, he's also a benevolent force. And that's why there are so many verses where the Torah repeatedly emphasizes the fact that God's justice and compassion and moral integrity and his goodness. Multiple verses. You look at 17a, 17b. So many verses describing God's kindness. Why? Why is his kindness so important? Because if God is only powerful, but God doesn't care about the oppressed, doesn't care about the orphan and the widow, who the other gods didn't care about, then you're living in a place where there's no justice. This is the whole point. It's not just we believe in one God, but as the Torah tells us in text 17b, that God carries out justice for the orphan and the widow and loves the stranger and gives them bread and clothing. God cares. God is benevolent. God is compassionate. He's not just powerful. So in order to truly appreciate a monotheistic life, is only when we trust the one benevolent God who stands behind it all. Anyway, I know I'm rushing this, but I still have one more very, very important point to make. I know it's almost 9 o'clock. And that is as follows. So we began our discussion today by acknowledging this perception that Judaism is very exclusive, right? That's how we started, right? That Judaism is very exclusive, very, just for Jews and nobody else. And then we traced our collective story back to Abraham, back to Avram Avinu, and we discovered a far more broad and inclusive narrative where Abraham introduced a revolutionary worldview of monotheism. But you have to also understand we were chosen for this. We were chosen to be the ones that teach the world this. And when we talk about being chosen and being priests, what do we mean we're a nation of priests? What is a priest? The job of the priest was to bring the people close to God. The job of the Jew is to bring people close to God. And that's why we have a clear prophecy. A prophecy from Isaiah, text 19a, where Isaiah says as follows. He's quoting from God. Ani Hashem Kirisich, I, God, have called you with righteousness. I will strengthen your hand. I will protect you, and I will set you as a covenant for all people, and I will make you a light unto the nations. And for those who come to the morning minyan, we've been learning, we just finished the book of Isaiah not too long ago. This is not a one-time verse. This statement that we will be a light unto the nations is mentioned several times, repeated multiple times in the book, this idea. Says David Kimchi, the Jewish people are destined to be a light unto the nations. As the verse states, nations will go by your light. This refers to the light of the Torah, which will issue forth to them from Zion. The Jewish people will be the cause of the sustenance of the nations of the world. through guiding them to observe the 7 Noahide laws and walk in the proper path. As the verse states, multitudes of nations will go to each other and tell one another, come, let us ascend to the mountain of God, to the temple of the God of Jacob. He will teach us in his ways so that we may walk in his path. It is our job, my friends. It's true that you don't find throughout history Jews being active lights unto the nations. It's true. For most of Jewish history, the Jews were not the ones that were inspiring humanity. But that's not because it's not part of our mission, but because we weren't able to. We were living in the shtetl, we were living in ghettos, we were living in poverty, we were living as a despised people. But as we come close to the ultimate, God has given us a mission. And God has told us at Mount Sinai, when he gave us a covenant and gave us his chosen nation to be a kingdom of priests, God said your job as priests will be to be the ones that are the light to the nations, bringing all of humanity back to me. And therefore, when we live with that kind of lifestyle, living with God as this monotheistic idea of God is more, but for today, a monotheistic idea, where we recognize that everything that I see visibly, all my visible sources of income and of strength and of health and of happiness are only the agents, the vehicles by which one invisible God gives me my source of blessing. Not only will our lives be happier, more stable, more stress-free, by default, we will become a light to the nations. So if you have 1 minute, I want to show you an amazing story, a modern day story. There's so many stories about this, how Jews are able to inspire others. But here's a beautiful, very modern, contemporary story that really brings out this idea. Oopsies, going too far.
I became friendly with this Ban Ki-moon, who was the Secretary General of the UN. He called me up one day and he says, Saul, do you have an intern program in your office? I have somebody that's very much into sports and very much interested in getting an intern job. I said, sure. I put him in touch with my person in HR. And that was it. I didn't hear of anything else. And 6 months goes by, and now it's in the summertime. And now it was the summer when Israel went to war in Gaza. And I get a call. My secretary tells me some guy's on the phone, says he's the Korean ambassador. Korean ambassador? I said, okay, put him through. Pick up Ambassador June. How are you? Saul? Oh, thank you so much. Thank you. I have no idea what he's talking about. I finally put 2 and 2 together. I realized that Ban Ki-moon recommended the Korean ambassador's daughter for an intern job in my office, and she's working in the office. She's working in my office. So we make a date. We make a date to go to lunch. And the morning that I was supposed to have lunch with him, he called up. He postponed his lunch by about a half an hour, and I met him at a kosher restaurant in New York City. And I walk in, and he comes in with a bodyguard, and he says to me, Saul, he says to me, you Jewish people must be very special people. And I said, Ambassador, why? He says, you know, Koreans are very much like Jews. We're very nervous. We brought our daughter here to New York, where she's going to fall into the wrong friends, the wrong group of friends, and we'd have no idea. But every day she comes home and she says, Dad, Mom, says, this crazy, what a place. These Jewish people are unbelievable. It's a nice place. Everybody treats everybody with respect. They have services every day. They pray in the office every day. So he says, I'm sitting now. That time, the Korea was on the Security Council had a table at the Security Council for a vote. For 26 years, Korea voted against Israel. 26 years. The record, somebody checked it out to make sure I wasn't fibbing. It says that morning there was a vote. That's why he's late. And it's the first time in the history of Korea he abstained. He refused to vote against Israel. That summer, they voted 4 votes to censure Israel. That morning, for every vote, I have the email trail to show anybody. I can show it to you. It says, Dear Saul, my new Jewish friend, do not worry. We will not vote against Israel. Every vote. So you
understand? Isn't that so powerful? Because Saul Werdiger understood that there's one God that controls everything. So middle of his workday, they stop the office, everyone stops to go pray mincha, the afternoon service. And this Korean girl tells her father, Jews have to understand, And in the UN, South Korea is not voting against Israel because some religious Jews were praying in the middle of the workday because they understood that God is the one in charge. When we live like that with monotheistic beliefs, not just I believe in one God, but we actually live without the chaos of cursing God and without the chaos of believing in multiple gods. We worship only one God. That's when we'll find happiness for ourselves and be a real light to the nation. Good night, my friends. We'll see you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Next week we shall continue, God willing.